Catching fish in these cold winter months is hard enough as it is. Throwing a big lake like Larford Specimen Lake into the situation makes it even harder. This place is absolutely teeming with fish, but when it comes to winter, they get moody, they shoal up and they don't want to feed. So I'm going to try everything I've got in the book today to try and get a few fish on the bank. On days like today, when you're just looking for that one bite, it's important you're using the right feeder. Today I've got 2 feeders in the range which I think will cover all my needs for this style of fishing. I've got the 30 gram XD hybrid feeder, which is basically the mini size, but it's got extra weight forward, so it gives you that extra chance to get a bit further with distance. And then I've got the small 40 gram, which is a little bit heavier than the standard small feeder. It just gives you that extra little punch again, still a small amount of bait, but you can get those extra few distances. It's always important as well with your feeders to have the right stem choice. Ideally you'll use the shortest stem because it doesn't stand out when it's on the bottom, but when you need that extra distance and you need to be accurate, the longer stem will really help you. Location is key this time of year. Unfortunately, not very often you can put a load of bait in and the fish come on top of you. You've got to find them. They don't move much this time of year, but they can be tempted. So it's really important. When I got here today, I had a good look around to see if I could see any fish maybe topping or you see an odd bubble. It was really flat calm first thing today, so it was a good chance to try and find the fish. I picked this location because we saw a couple of smaller fish top, nothing else on the whole lake, so that was the best chance in my opinion. But as the session progresses, we've got a bit of wind now, so we've got a bit of ripple on the water. Still not seeing any fish top, which is really strange, but we'll still be looking out for them because if one does top, I'll be chucking straight on top of it. That really works well this time of year. But we'll keep going through the motions. The single little traps are set. I'm more than happy with my bait behaving correctly. I've got the perfect little hook bait, so fingers crossed, one's going to pick it up shortly. When targeting fish in these cold conditions, the most important thing for me is to making sure my bait's working correctly and it's presented correctly. So today we're using the 2mm fishery pellets. These are like a standard coarse pellet, which the fish love and you will catch fish on, but in my head, I have to go one step further. So I've added the mainline syrup to these. This is a real sticky liquid that's got a really sweet smell to it. Coconutty smell, really nice. But what that does is it gives you an edge if you're in a competition, but the stickiness on the pellets, we're fishing in 12 or 14 foot of water here, I know that my bait is going to get to the bottom and it's going to be perfectly presented. So there they are, they're nice and soft and they just stick around the feeder perfectly, break down nicely. But one other little tip I've got, which works really well when you've got a bit of water out in front of you, is to save a few of the fishery pellets so they're still dry. So I'll just have a little tub with me with a few dry ones in, and when I'm loading my feeder, I put my first layer on with the damp pellets, and then the second layer I just put a little pinch of the dry ones in with my wet ones, so you get a mixture of the two. And all that does is it allows the pellets to break down a little bit quicker, and because they're unsoaked pellets you get an odd one that floats, so it sends signals back to the top and hopefully any passing fish will go and have a look for your hook bait. First fish, nice skimmer, not the biggest fish I've caught in the world, but very welcome on a day like today. I've been working my feeder to the right hand side of my peg, and I just literally swapped over to the small 40 gram over the 30 mini feeder, only because I couldn't quite get the distance I wanted to get to. So I've chucked it in, literally put the rod on the rest, and before too long it's gone round with a nice skimmer. So that tells me my bait's working well, my hook bait's not a bad choice, so let's keep continuing, hopefully find a few more, and maybe we might get one of the bigger carp that lives in here. Even though we're fishing a huge water like the one behind me, a small feeder is really important. Because I'm searching around trying to find the fish rather than building a swim, it's really important you're not putting big clumps of bait everywhere in the area you're fishing in. So the little mini XD and the small XD is the perfect amount of bait for one mouthful from the carp. So that allows me with confidence to chuck around without building big piles of bait everywhere. In the summer, it'd be a different story. I'd have a great big feeder on and I'd be putting some gear in. Most important bit of tackle in the winter is your flask. Keeps you nice and warm and keeps you composed. Cup of tea usually brings on a bite. Cheers. Second fish, they're getting a bit bigger. Decent bream this time. Again, I chuck straight down the hole. It's never worth chucking somewhere different if you've caught one the previous chuck. So I've gone straight down the same hole, same bait, same hook bait, and round it's gone again. 2 bream in the net and they're getting bigger. Another bait I don't go without in the winter is a bit of ground bait. It's always good to mix it up with pellets on the feeder as well as a bit of ground bait in the winter months. So today's mix, quite simple. I've got the mainline 100% crushed expander in there. That makes out the bulk of the ground bait. And then I've got a 20% of the mainline method mix, which is probably a bit too rich for this time of year on its own. So mixed with the ground expander, it evens it out, but you get a lovely smell. And it's like a lovely soft, fluffy texture. And with this, I'll be adding a little bit to my pellets around the feeder, or which I'm going to probably do later on in this session, is to build a base somewhere. If we're not getting the bites roaming around looking for fish, I'm going to create an area where I think the fish might come to, and I hopefully pick a few off the top of it. So the ground bait is a great base for that. You get a lot of smell, a lot of attractant, but not a lot of feed. Hardware for today, you've got to find a bit of finesse when you're doing this style of fishing this time of year. So I've gone for the 12-foot of Ventus, 5-pound mainline to an 8-pound shock leader. So we're only chucking out a small feeder, but that lighter line will allow the feeder to get the extra distance, plus you've got the shock leader to cast off. The 12-foot of Ventus has got a nice through soft action, so you haven't got to worry about bumping any skimmers like we've caught today, but when you get a carp on, it's absolutely at home. On the short line, the tackle's very much the same, but I've just stepped down in rod length. I've gone for the 11-foot. You could probably use a 10-foot. Because the water's quite deep, I like to pick my line up quickly, so I'll choose the 11-foot. It's got a lovely soft through action, and again, I'm just using a little 5-pound main line through to a little shock leader, and that just gives me that little bit of comfort in case we get a bigger carp. We've been fishing for a fair few hours now. It's not getting any warmer, and the bites aren't coming any quicker. We've had 2 skimmers. Pretty much explored most of my swim now. Bit annoying. Thought I had the tactics right, but nothing to show for at the moment. So as a backup, what I've done is I've plumbed around, found a nice area a lot closer in. It's actually like 22 meters out. And what I'm going to do there is I'm going to put a bit of bait in. Obviously setting the traps doesn't seem to be working at the moment, so late on in sessions fish tend to come closer in on the lakes, and hopefully at some point during the day they might want a bit of food. So what I've done is I've put a mixture of ground bait, some micro pellets, just a few grains of corn and an odd maggot, hopefully to stand out on the bottom, and if there's any passing fish that are coming back up that shelf, they might see it later on, we might get an odd pull. There's definitely a chance of a skimmer there, but I've got my fingers crossed hoping for one of Larford's famous carp. Hook baits today, pretty simple really. I've got my faithful wafters. They're the mainline dumbbell wafters. I've brought all 4 flavours with me, but due to a bit of research and recent form on the venue, yellow has been really popular. So that's been my main choice of hook bait. I've got some round dumbbells as well. I prefer those this time of year because they're very neutral against your hook. So even if a fish is feeding a bit fragilely, little suck, that hook's in his mouth. I've also brought a great winter bait, and that's a bit of punch bread. I don't mind putting that in the hybrid feeder. That works really, really well. Puffs up, so it's quite a big bait, but not a lot of content there. That's a really good bait, well worth a try. Then I've got corn. Corn's a very good bait on this venue. The carp love it, so I'll occasionally put that on. Really good bottom bait, especially when the water's clear. Do like a bit of corn. And then if things get really hard, we've got some dead maggots. I like to put these on a small hook and band them on a hair so I can get away with a really small hook and just try and get a bite, but hopefully it won't come to that. Because we're feeding pellets around the feeder, I've got some 4 and 6 mils and an odd 8 mil, just standard coarse pellets. They're well worth putting on a band, just if you're not getting any bites. Fish love pellets, they'll eat them all year round. Then just to set off the baits, I've got a couple of goos with me. I do like to use a bit of goo, especially when the water's clear. I've got my two favourite flavours, which I thought would complement the baits that I'm using today. I've got a pineapple power smoke. Now there's two things I like to do with this. Either a little smear on the top of the feeder, which just enhances the flavour and everything. And also when you cast it in, it leaves like a colour of trail down to the bait. So it's like a big arrow going, please come and eat me. And then I've got some corn twist. This is a really, really nice smell. It's a really strong, corny, popcorny smell. Really good on a bit of corn itself or another hook bait. All worth trying. No one's got the right answers, but it's good to have a selection with you because you never know what could work on the day. Well, time's really ticking away now. I'm sat on the short line over the little bit of bait I've put in, still presenting the little hybrid over the top. The weather's been awful, freezing cold. Oh, got a bite there. Yes, straight into one. Just shows there is some fish on this short line, but I'm really surprised today with the conditions. We've had snow and ice this week. The water temperature's freezing and we're still getting an odd bite. That's what fishing's all about. Haven't caught a carp yet, but I'm going to be here till it's dark. Hopefully we might get one. But these skimmers, they're decent fish and just prove a little bit of bait, well presented hook bait. It all works nicely together. It's well worth getting out on the bank rather than sitting in and moaning about the weather. To say that's been a tough day's fishing is probably an understatement. But we've caught some fish, we've probably had a dozen skimmers or so, some pretty decent ones as well. And in these conditions, you can't ask for more than a bite. You never know what's going to be on the end of the hook, but you know your traps have worked. Fed the long line early on and we've caught some fish on there, just setting little tiny traps. And then the short line we've put a bit of bait in has really come good late on in the session. So what we've set out to do has worked. Just unfortunate we haven't had any carp, but hey, we're out on the bank, it's freezing cold, we're all loving it, and we've caught some fish. Well, look at that. That got the cameramen running around. We were thinking about packing up. I was sat on the short line catching a few skimmers. It was pretty good to be fair, considering the conditions. And I thought, I've got to have another chuck on that long rod. So I put the long rod out again, started wrapping some bits up and it's gone round. Look at that, just shows you. Perfect presentation, nice little feeder. It's took a long time to come, but well worth it. Over the moon with that.